So for you, those of you online, we were just talking about pragmatics in the class, and we realized that the due date on the assignment on the Blackboard page for the discussion doesn't necessarily line up with the week it's due on the syllabus. So we're going to make everything due on Sundays. So each week assignment will be due that Sunday. So Sunday after we talk about it in class. So that's just to fill you in. Sweet, great. Other questions?
So since like the sources are kind of given, do we need to have like a works cited page?
If it doesn't say it in the assignment, then you don't need it. Well, I think we're going to do some later stuff, and I'm going to have you cite. But like, I don't think it says it in the assignment for this one, does it? Then let's not worry about it. So, okay, other questions? Shall we leap in and talk about our readings for this week? Is it about class or? No, I don't mean that. Like that sounds like this really. I hate having a mask because nobody can see whether I'm smiling or not. Because it sounded like really accusatory. Like, are you talking about? How dare you talk about something that's not a part of this class, right? What was that like? Something we're sharing?
Her laptop case.
It is a cool laptop case. We can share that. That's okay. I like geography. What are the lines? Is it temperature or just colorfulness?
I think it's just colorful.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I wanted to get little stickers to say like where I've been, put it like on the different areas.
And where would that include?
United States.
They have this. Has anybody been in the nursing building yet? They have this. Map of like places I want to work versus places I ended up getting a job, and it's like all of the dots where I want to work is like all these exotic places, and then everything, and like there's like 20 dots in Kansas, which I think is really funny. Oh, expectations. I always feel depressed with stuff like that. Even like I consider myself pretty well traveled, right? But like for a while they had on Facebook before I migrated off of Facebook. I'm one of the millennials who doesn't do social media anymore. But anyways, I migrated off of Facebook. But before then they had like, oh, you can get a map and you can say every place you've lived and every place you've traveled, and it puts little pins in it, and then everyone can see where you've been. And I put it up and I'm like, gosh, I haven't been anywhere. Like, this is really depressing. Where have I been? So places I've lived are, so I was born in the greater Saginaw area of Michigan, which is deindustrialized wasteland. I love it, but that's what it is. And then I lived in Richmond, Virginia, Knoxville, Tennessee, Mankato, Minnesota. I went back to Michigan for a while, and now I've lived in Kansas. I studied for 3 months in Dakar, Senegal, and I studied for 3 months in Europe. I was living in Marburg, Germany at the time. So.
Which part of Europe? Didn't say, sorry.
What's that?
What part of Europe?
Oh, I was living in Marburg, Germany. So I was learning to read German in Germany on the German government's dollar, which was pretty cool. So I can't read German anymore. I've forgotten.
They need to refresh your memory.
What's that?
Maybe they need to pay you to refresh your memory.
Yeah, if they were willing to give me money to go and live someplace for another 3 months and like eat good food and drink beer while I refresh learning German, I totally would.
What's your dream vacation destination?
Oh, where would I want to? I always wanted to go to French Polynesia. It's like South Pacific, it's in the middle of nowhere. No mosquitoes.
They don't have mosquitoes?
They don't have mosquitoes there. They have weird exotic fruits that they don't sell in the United States.
I was going to say Greece, but you know, that's better, there's no mosquitoes.
Well, there's not, actually, most of Europe doesn't really have mosquitoes.
What the heck?
Yeah, like when I was in Germany, like there's no mosquitoes and there's no like nets. You just like open the windows and like you know, actually the windows like kick up. They call them kip auf, and so the windows kip auf, and you like they just go up, and then like the rain won't fall on it. So like no matter how hard it's raining, you just leave it open. No, it's like on a hinge.
German, like listening to it is the funniest thing.
It is.
What's that?
Because like they like just like mash words together, so
It's
it's just
like
like this.
Oh yeah, the combined words. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, no, I love watching those videos where it's like, they'll take like a word and they'll translate it from like English to Spanish to French, and then they'll put it in German, and it's just hilarious because like with other languages, it's like short and simple or whatever, and then like German, it's like really aggressive and it's so long.
Oh, the flexibility of German is fantastic,
I know.
though, because like you can take any series of words and turn them into another word.
Yeah, I feel
You
like
can
it's
take
really
any
practical.
verb and turn it into a noun and vice versa. So you can just like take any word and flip it into something else and then combine it. Like I
Well,
love that.
It's a practical language. Like you're like, what's the word for an ambulance? And it's like a hospital car. Like they just shove it together.
But then on the other hand, the grammar is so heavy-handed that it takes forever to say anything. So, okay, we should probably talk about like the thing we're here to talk about. not German and but this is also a community building exercise, so it's perfectly okay if we get off and we talk about whatever, right? In some ways, and actually this is a good tie-in, talking about whatever with each other actually is a good expression of one of the ethos that we're talking about today, right? So, okay, so I know, I tied it in randomly. I just justified my own lying. Yeah, distraction. Okay, so what's our value for today? Yes. This sounded like, it felt like I was teaching Sunday school to kindergartners again. The one-word answer that's always right, you know? Okay, so what do we mean by that more specifically? Someone can just read it aloud if they want. What's our Benedictine value for today?
We believe in the love of Jesus Christ and the faith revealed to us, and handed down by the Roman Catholic Church. We grow in a relationship with Jesus by using the gifts of faith and reason to see and do things the way God does.
Yeah, and so the way that we've set up connecting this particular values, this particular Benedictine value to our habit of mind for this week, is particularly the operative part of that is our gifts of faith and reason, right? So like we're seeing how a belief in the reason as a gift, right, changes how we orient to, right, different disciplines, or at least gives us the opportunity, because there are people who don't have faith, right, and don't believe in reason that will orient to it the same way. There's a lot of liberal arts schools in the country. I studied in an interdisciplinary way at a secular college, and most people weren't religious and still had that a very similar orientation to what we're discussing as habit of mind, right, but didn't necessarily come from that place. So, but that's the value that we're expressing. So, okay, what's our habit of mind for this week? What was the gist of that?
Integration of knowledge.
Integration of knowledge. What do we mean by that? How are we talking about that?
That like knowledge should be interdisciplinary, so we should take it to like solve world problems and look at the world with a more nuanced view.
Yeah, it's that we can learn a lot by, and this is actually like I know a lot of people always feel upset about taking gen eds, but this is why gen eds exist, right? It's because if we explore a bunch of different things, ideally, those things should be able to be borrowed on for each other, right? And a lot of people do that in their work lives, but that's kind of different from how education has changed, right? Did anybody catch this thing about how education is changing? Came both in the statement about the value generally, as well as in the piece of and I really should learn to pronounce. Anybody here take Latin in school? I've never taken Latin. Have you taken Latin? You wanna go? You're gonna become my Latin expert for the week.
No. I took it for 1 year.
Okay, I saw another hand. Was that you or
No, I only took Latin for 2 years.
Sam? How long have you taken Latin for?
Like 2 years.
2 years. Okay, I'm gonna use you. You can be my alternate. You're my understudy.
I still don't really know anything. Here we are.
Well, it's more than me. I've had 0 Latin. I've only written Latin. I've never I've never written it other than names of books and texts that I've written. But so how do you say that?
Which one?
The core text. This is on that page 1 of the.
Ex corde ecclesiae.
Thank you. Round of applause. We come across German and French words, I'll have a go at it. But until then, so okay, yeah. So it comes through in that as well. So how is academia changing or universities changing?
I feel like because we've learned so much, we've gained so much knowledge that there's typically okay, you're studying biology, and that's how they kind of carve they box it in. Yes. But yeah, so they try to it's more of a focus on studying this one thing, not branching out or anything like that, almost so that you can fully understand that one thing, because there's so much to know.
Yeah.
I think some of it is because, so the liberal arts tradition is about developing the person, whereas what sort of the more modern way of education is more of, it's more like treating a university as a trade school almost, as you go there to learn how to learn all about biology or learn all about this particular subject.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I think both of those are true, right? We have, and in my own field, we'd call this differentiation, right? That the academic world has become more highly differentiated, meaning that it's more and more fragmented over time, right? As we get more and more disciplines, we're building new disciplines in some ways all the time, right? And a lot of that is actually has to do with politics too. It's not just necessarily that it makes sense within because if you go to some other parts of the world, it's less differentiated between different areas, and you take things more broadly as well, right? It's not just at liberal arts schools. Liberal arts schools are one of the places where this happens, where we actually explore a lot of different things. But yeah, increasingly it's treated as a trade school, but that also means that knowledge itself becomes more fragmented. We're less likely to talk across different disciplines now, unless you're specifically somebody who tries to be interdisciplinary. So what's wrong with that? Why is it that, us as a college has sort of been in other liberal arts schools and other, we could also say things like interdisciplinary studies programs, because I said, I studied at a secular college, State University, but I studied in an interdisciplinary program for both my master's and my PhD, which means I took classes in graduate level classes in history and philosophy and literary criticism. Not all places are like that, right? But those are called interdisciplinary studies. People do that as well. But why is it that people, whether it's the interdisciplinary studies, whether it's liberal arts, why is it that people have sort of said, I'm not going to specialize in the way that a lot of the other places have?
As in, are you asking for a case for liberal arts or against liberal arts?
I'm asking for a case for, but we can do against
Okay,
too, if
well-
you want to go that route.
No.
Anytime there's a binary, you got to do them both, right?
Well, do you know of Christian College?
No, I don't think I do.
So it's a very Catholic liberal arts school on the East Coast. I was committed to go there till May, but they're very liberal arts in terms of the philosophy, theology, history, and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so their idea is a reason why it's so beneficial is the idea that you can't employers don't want to teach their workers how to be good people and how to think.
Yeah.
And liberal arts likes to claim that if you are just going into STEM, you'll be able to crunch numbers or analyze stuff, but you won't necessarily have maybe the people skills or the general knowledge and ability to think that you would if you had gone to say a liberal arts school and majored in a liberal arts field.
Yeah.
That's generally the way I've heard, like, their big pitch is like, we teach you how to think at a liberal arts school.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
So that ties in with your developing the person, right? Which is, I think, aligned almost directly out of here. But yeah, totally, yeah, that's one reason. Why else might you?
I mean, like, each discipline gives you a different view of something, and so like, if you want to like fix a situation or you want to like truly understand something, you
Yeah.
kind of need like multiple perspectives coming in to like fully understand the full like thing, instead of just understanding it from one point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like what she was saying, like, if you don't go to a liberal arts school and you go to like specific, like a technical college or something for a very specific education, I feel like you would get a bit of sort of like an educational tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't be able to like see other perspectives nearly as easily as you would if you were able to get a broader education.
Yeah. Anyone else want to weigh in? Now, we should be careful not to disparage too much technical learning, right? But like, the question is more like, what are your goals in learning, right? So like, I think that the habit of mind, as we're expressing it here, the goal of learning is to understand, right? And so if your goal is to understand, differentiation can be very harmful, right? Understand any given phenomenon that you're studying, right? And we're going to look at, as we move along today, an example of somebody from biology, doing that. Sorry, catching my breath. So what's the goal of technical education then?
I think the goal of technical education is more of like training you in a specific field to get extremely good at it. That way, when you do go out and decide to get a job in, let's say, in an engineering field, for example, because I'm pretty sure most of those are very technical. That way, your employer isn't basically training you on how to do your job, basically. But that way you can just say like, okay, you know what you're doing, get to work, kind of a thing. So I think it's more of like, with the technical fields, or not necessarily fields, but like technical learning, as in you're only studying one subject, I definitely think that it does encourage you to be extremely good in that one discipline. That way, you know how to use every little piece of it in a career.
Just sort of like what she was saying about the idea of it being very technical, and like generally when you're going into a technical field, but yeah, like a STEM field or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like you're like, for instance, like here they have people who are majoring in engineering, but then they have civil or mechanical, and then there's other types of engineering, and then generally you're preparing yourself for sometimes a very specific job, even like becoming very fine-tuned. Like, so I have a cousin who's like a welder, so sort of at like a technical school, they'll like study very, very specific craft also. So it's like, it's not necessarily like, it's sort of like a balance. You're trying to find a balance between like general knowledge and like specific knowledge and taking advantage of your strengths, to pursue a specific career.
Yeah. Yeah.
So another benefit of like a trade school like thing is, for at least engineering and some other schools, you could just get it done in 4 years rather than taking the extra time to take like philosophy classes and stuff. You can get all your credits done sooner rather than taking the extra semesters to take the gen ed classes. So you can get into the field sooner.
Any other weigh-ins? If we were to condense that, what's the difference between a liberal arts school of learning and a technical school of learning?
Liberal arts colleges give you like a broader education to allow you to better develop critical thinking with different perspectives, whereas a technical school gives you more time to specifically focus on a specific trade.
I'd say education versus training. Like
Yeah.
you go to a trade school and you're there to get trained for your job, or you go to a school just for engineering, there to get the job. Whereas like it's education, so it's like an investment in who you are.
Yeah, yeah. And another way is like, I always think of it as the difference between doing and knowing, right? Like, in a more technical education, you're trained to do, right? Here specifically, as well as in the broader liberal arts tradition, as well as in interdisciplinary traditions, like you are being trained to understand and to know, right? You're also, I think that is different in terms of like this individualized growth of the person, right? Like I think that's intertwined with it, right? Like knowing and understanding affects the person in a very different way than learning to do. Doing is external, right? Knowing is internal. So like, in a lot of ways, yeah, like the idea is you work on yourself, you learn this habit of mind to think more broadly, right? And I have to say too, like, just from personal like explanation, I find that like I wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that I do work-wise if it wasn't for the fact that I was more broadly trained, right? So like, you know, I find myself 1 week digging into history stuff, 1 week digging into, so I don't know if I referenced this, I just finished a project that I'm getting ready for publication on the way scientists write about extraterrestrials and how it interrelates with race. But that meant that I spent a lot of time reading science journal articles about extraterrestrials, right? Out of like exobiology journals. Weird thing to do, right? But like, if it wasn't for feeling to some degree like I could consolidate all these different ideas together, there was something uniting behind it, I don't know if it would be worth doing that sort of stuff. As well as the fact that like, what the end product is definitely a result of this sort of interdisciplinary work, right? Of doing all these different things. Okay, cool. Did you guys catch this? It's on page 2. This kind of gets us into like, so that's at a very individual level. Like, how is it that our text for today talks about understanding ourselves as liberal arts, as a liberal arts institution at a broader level, at a more community or human level even? What's the benefit of it? If you look on page 2, there's this discussion of a living organism. Did you guys catch this? This is particularly a statement from John Paul II about what Catholic universities have to be. I think it's a really interesting statement. Number 16 on there. FYI, just a note on the way that I teach. If you haven't caught on, like it's very beneficial to either bring a copy of it or bring an electronic device. You can open these things on your phone or whatever too, you know. So even if you just bring your phone to class and open it up when you get here, it's useful to have the text in front of you. I like text, so. Okay, so what's the image here? Do you guys see where I'm talking about?
The living union of individual organisms dedicated to the search for truth.
Yeah.
That part.
Yeah. You just want to read the whole sentence?
The whole sentence?
Yeah.
Okay. But a university, and especially a Catholic university, has to be a living union of individual organisms dedicated to the search for truth. It is necessary to work towards a higher synthesis of knowledge, in which alone lies the possibility of satisfying that thirst for truth, which is profoundly inscribed in the heart of the human person.
Okay, so what's being said here?
That it's not just about like me or whatever, it's about how everyone coming together, like learning their individual things can come together to create that like whole picture of truth. So it's that like Mother Teresa quote of like, what you can do, I cannot, and what I can do, you cannot, but like together we can make a difference or whatever.
Yeah. So each individual discipline is important. So like that's another way that we shouldn't be too disparaging towards the other end either. Like if we all just sat around, rather than taking a bunch of different classes from a bunch of different subjects, if you all just sat around and talked freely between subjects all the time, like you would never probably learn very much either, right? So instead, like the idea is like, in some ways we could think about, so it's like, here it's commenting on you as an individual organism becoming broad, right? But also like, the university itself becomes an organism with different parts, right? So like I am not a mathematician, mathematician. I hate math. I'm bad at math. I mean, I had to take math. I had to learn to do statistics. I had to compute chi-square by hand. It's like 5 pages worth of computation. It's horrible. I swore I would never do any more math after that, and I haven't at all. Like I don't even add without a calculator anymore. Like, but like, and I'm not saying that's good. Like, math is important, right? It's an important equal part of the discipline. But like, as a part of the body, right, of this college, like, you are not going to throw me into a stats class, and you're definitely not going to throw me into like, I don't know, like a calculus class or something like that, or higher level math or anything like that. Like, I don't know how to do it anymore.
So this is a little bit of backtracking. Hopefully it's not.
Oh, by all means, backtrack.
But when you said you think that so you think that if we were more free flowing in the topics that we were talking about in the discussion, that we would not learn as well?
I think there's a place for that, and there's a place for disciplinary training, right? So like thinking about it, it's like when we talk about coming at things from multiple angles, you don't get multiple angles unless you get people from different positions, right? So like if we just sort of combined and became one, like in essence, like one discipline all in and of ourselves, and just called ourselves interdisciplinary, right? We wouldn't be as effective in some ways, right?
Also, I think it's important that like you have some people who are like specialized, because like you wouldn't want, you know, like a philosophy teacher acting as a surgeon, but you also wouldn't want your surgeon like, you know, and so if you don't have people who are specialized, then yeah, nothing gets done.
Yeah, I'm never going to teach a nursing class, because like I would kill people, right? But like, you know, nursing professors are never going to teach a class on race and ethnicity because they're not experts on that, right? So like that's where our division of labor kind of comes in, right? And so yeah, we think of the university as a unified whole body with many different members, right? Which is not really all that surprising. There's obviously, like what John Paul's writing here, there's a link to something else. You guys catch that?
There's what?
There's a link to something else. This is essentially how the Bible describes like society, right? Or the church in particular, right? So like the idea of a body with many parts, right? It's the same exact analogy here.
Yeah.
Right? So in essence, like the university in some ways just becomes a microcosm of that. And that's kind of the idea, right? Even though not everybody in here is even religious, right? Like so we have some professors that are not, right? So it's not a prerequisite to having that disciplinary knowledge, but how do we orient towards those people knowledge is the question, right? We orient to it in the same way, right? As a piece of part of a many parts body, right? Together we're better. Individually, we understand less. Is anybody familiar with that metaphor about an elephant?
The elephant in the room?
No, not that one. Yeah, that's the more common one that I'm referencing. So like there's like a joke about people being blindfolded and asked to describe an elephant by touching it. Have you ever heard this before?
Yeah.
I think I've heard it. I don't remember.
So what would happen if we were just to blindfold ourselves and go and try to touch an elephant and figure out what it is? Well, let's hypothetically say that it's the world's friendliest
Are we
elephant.
assuming that you've seen an elephant before?
Yeah, we'll assume you've seen an elephant before, but you only get to stay in like one spot.
Oh, then you could be in trouble.
Well, you would have different parts. And you would have to try to all fit together as a group. You had different ideas. And the only commonality would really just be like the skin.
Yeah. Well, one person might think that they're touching, I don't know, like a hippopotamus, and they're kind of close skin, or a rhinoceros. One person might think that they had got a hold of a really big snake, you know. Somebody might get walked by the tail and think, I don't know, that it's a horse, you know, whatever, right? But like individually, like nobody understood the elephant, would probably understand the elephant, but collectively, if they were all to talk across, they probably would. This is kind of the metaphor that's also like, I think, dancing around here, right? Like that's a good metaphor for how we view education at a liberal arts institution, is that like, by taking things from these many different perspectives, it helps.
My only question when it comes to that is like
Yeah.
the idea of like, well, like the ancient teachers like Aristotle and like Socrates and
Yeah.
stuff like that, like they weren't necessarily like, oh well, today you get class from this guy. You know what I mean? Like they it was very much like one teacher oriented, like
Yeah,
one
yeah.
teacher, and like granted, I would say that like the Socratic method, which is it's the one of asking questions, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that in and of itself creates the capability to come at everything with different angles.
Yeah.
So I think that like that's one way you can effectively learn a lot or different perspectives about a topic or like different insights from different people like through that method. But like
Yeah.
but like they didn't have like different people who were more like well versed in certain topics and whatnot.
Well, I got two answers for that. Right?
Okay.
So one is that like there was a lot less known at the time of Socrates and Aristotle. So I think that allowed for a very different orientation sometimes. Two, and this is my subset, they're wrong a lot. You know, and and I really loved when I was an undergrad, I had a political philosopher that I took a ton of classes. I love reading The Republic. I love, right, they're great, but like a lot of things that get said in there we now know isn't really true. Like it was good, like it's a good method, right? Another thing is talking about the Socratic method itself. To some degree, what we see happening is in the Socratic method, like the people in the room end up in some ways embodying exactly what we're describing, right? So like you take Plato's Republic, for example, like one of the person's a politician, one of the, right? And then even you get like, even beyond like disciplinary, like you get some people who are really young and some people who are really old. And the thing about the Socratic method is it's actually pulling those together. So in some ways, like, that's more like a micro version of what we're already talking about.
Okay.
Like, that's kind of how I would view it. I don't know. You can respond to that. You can disagree with me as much as you
I don't. Well, I agree with that. I guess I definitely would love to talk to you more about like what is like obviously wrong with their teachings and stuff like that. Like, granted that like you're totally. Well, I agree with you when it comes to the idea of like they have far less knowledge about like so many things, but like I don't know. I just think that the method they created was like, I mean, sort of like you're describing, like maybe a micro version of the idea that like you're learning from different angles, right?
Yeah, and also I'll give an example from my own field, right? Like in Plato's Republic, what ends up being described is just authoritarianism, right? So like if you were to link what Socrates designs, it's an entirely administered state. It would have more to do in common with something like Benito Mussolini's fascism than what we live in now. And I think that there's something inherently wrong with that. Like, and I think most people today would agree with me. Like the idea of like kidnapping people's children at birth so nobody knows who their parents are, like that's a really weird idea by modern standards, right? So like that's the kind of thing that I was like, you know, I think that like it's great work and everyone should read it, but like at the same time, like we should always read it through the context of our present, right? And realize that there are like, you know, we can't idealize it too much, or so that's kind of more what I was saying. And then as well as like some of the things, from what I understand from people in the natural sciences, some of the things about like Aristotle's physics has some real problems. And I'm very likely, like, if you're going to talk to a literary critic, they're probably not going to feel like we should have just stopped at Aristotle's Poetics, right? Like, that we've actually developed some other techniques that actually work better. Anyways, a little bit divergent. Good thought, though. I could talk shop all day. Okay, let's move on to our practical case of this, our example. Who are we looking at? What's that?
Wangari Maathai.
Yep. Wangari Maathai. And so what's Wangari's? Let's start with that sort of like the page with the description. What's Wangari's or Maathai's? Probably say Maathai. I feel like it's always more respectful to call authors by their last name rather than first. So Maathai, what's Maathai's story?
He grows up in a rural, I think like kind of mountainous area in Kenya. And she remembers having this image of a little stream, a little trickle coming out of the tree. And then she goes to college and she comes back and she sees just very wide destruction of the ecosystem and the economy.
I want to back up. I want to talk about who she is before we get to her work. So that's great. Like, I think I probably wasn't explicit enough. Let's back up and talk about who she is, and then I can even hand it back over to you if you like. So who is she, like, in terms of, like, what's her biography? I think it's worth it.
And she was able to get a education here.
Yeah.
I think she graduated, and she went on to get, I think, a PhD or something later on.
Yep, from the University of
And,
Nairobi. Did anybody catch what's significant about her PhD? I think this is kind of cool.
Wasn't she the first woman in her field or something to get it?
And like, yeah, in the region of Africa she was in, she was the first woman to get a PhD.
Yeah, she's the first person in all of Central and East Africa to get a PhD. That's pretty cool. Anyway, so just had to throw that in. Sorry.
So,
Yeah.
So she was able to get her PhD, and then she went back to Kenya and realized that it was in such a terrible state, so she decided to found the Greenbelt movement.
Yeah.
To try and help out like the women of the area and plant trees and everything. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's sort of the broad view. Did you want to pick up and go into a little more detail again?
Sure. So
I just didn't want to cut you off and then not come back to you. So
it's fine. She saw the destruction, or she saw this real poverty in the area, and with her background, she was able to see the different causes, like there was malnutrition, and that was caused partly by the economy of the region that destroyed the environment. So she was able to think interdisciplinarily and see the relationship between these different areas and see how she can bring up a solution that will solve answers, that will solve those problems.
yeah. Anyone else want to add into that? So what are some of the areas that she sees issues with? You hit on some of them. What are some of the problems caused by not having trees?
There's like some of the problems, because there's like the deforestation stuff,
Yeah.
and that was causing like soil erosion because like the trees were protecting it and stuff.
Yes, so soil erosion. What happens from the soil erosion?
Mudslides.
Mudslides.
And
What?
it clouds up the river.
Yeah, it clouds up the river, and it pulls nutrients out of the fields, right? So that essentially it causes famine, right? This is the same thing. Have you guys heard of desertification?
Yes.
So like through broad swaths of the world today, the world's turning into desert. And the same thing happens, right? So basically like what was very rich, fertile region. Good example, this is the Sahel region of Africa is like this. But there's also parts of like Central Asia that are like this, right? Where like literally it's just turning into a desert. And lots of people are dying from the famines created by that, right? And this is a very similar situation. What caused the deforestation to begin with? Did anyone catch this?
The cash crops.
Cash crops. Why did cash crops happen?
Because the British like made them into a colony, and then like they're selling into the international trades.
Yeah, so there's this history that she's picking up on that like basically like they were taken over by Europe, by particularly Britain, right? Britain tore everything down, put in cash crops. That's where the deforestation came from, right? What else did happen to the indigenous people as a result of this? This is something that, thinking of her liberal arts background, there's something interconnected here.
They lost the ability to like take care of themselves and like know how to be self-sufficient basically, because they were so focused on planting and growing cash crops.
Yeah.
They lost quite a bit of their culture as well, because like part of the reason why that they had the trees is because like the women passed down to their children like, oh, you have like these trees, you respect them, and then when you tore out the trees, that's not passed down anymore.
Yeah. When I was living in Senegal, people, if you were building a wall, you wouldn't chop down a tree, you just build the wall into the tree. Like, so no one ever cut down trees ever. And it was probably grew out of originally these same indigenous beliefs, very similar indigenous beliefs to what's in Kenya, which it cuts across a lot of like more arid climate beliefs about like nature, right? And you don't cut down trees, like you keep them around, right? And so like here you get, she's tying together all these things, right? And to some degree, like if you want to think about it, like Kenyan society, just like how we were talking about the university being a body, to some degree Kenyan society was a body that got destroyed, to some degree dismembered, separated out, right? So that like people no longer had the same ideas about the world, no longer thought about nature, were no longer raised in the same manner, no longer did the same kind of work, right? And all these things got forgotten to some degree. And so like her movement is an attempt, right, to sort of combine all those things back together, right? And so you think about like, and not to say that specifically, like maybe she would have developed this habit of mind independent of being trained in the liberal arts tradition, but you see a lot of the same habit of mind here, right? That she's combining, if she was just a narrow biologist, would she decide to fight famine and poverty? Probably not, right? Like, would she want to connect those things into what is a very biological, because what's her solution? What does she end up doing? She plants trees. It's a very simple solution, right? Driven by her own discipline, what she does, right? What she knows, right? But also like all these other things help, like essentially being more broadly trained helped her to see, right, what was going on. And that's how she describes herself. Okay, other thoughts or questions people have? Do you see how all these things line up for this week? Any other thoughts, questions, etc.? Just to get into like a mild, like not as grand scale as talking about colonialism, but do you guys know the Mount St. Scholastica thing that's in just the description of her biography? There's another campus used to be over here. You guys know that already? Yeah. When COVID is over, you should go visit the nuns. It's kind of cool.
Are you grading our papers? Is that how this
I will,
works?
yeah.
Okay. Are you an English teacher by chance?
Oh, you want to know about grammar. One, I would say correct your papers. Because like, I do not do, but I'm not going to be like sparsing out your sentences. I grade on
Content?
Yeah, I'm a content grader. So.
Awesome.
So yes, don't, but definitely correct it, because like, if I can't tell what you're saying, then content falls away as well. So. Any other questions before I shut the camera off, just in case? Okay, wonderful.